This episode is brought to you by Affinidi. As India leads in digital innovation, the focus on data privacy, security, and consent-driven data sharing is more critical than ever. In 2024, CXOs are prioritizing digital acceleration, efficiency, and productivity, driving a 13% year-on-year increase in IT spending, adding $7 billion primarily in cloud, AI, and security solutions. The Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, or the DPDP Bill 2023, introduces deemed consent and the right to withdraw consent, transforming sectors like BFSI, life sciences, and retail. This change is fueling demand for secure, decentralized identity access management solutions. Hi, I'm Deepti Ahuja, Head of Content at HD Smartcast, and your host on Mint Etc. In this episode, we discuss how Indian companies are adopting emerging technologies while managing secure, consent-driven data sharing.
Joining us is Mr. Glenn Gore, CEO of Affinidi and Lemma Tree, leading their growth and innovation. Our moderator for today is Mr. Mani James. He is the CBO of Mosaic Digital with 25 plus years of experience guiding companies in finding new revenue streams and driving growth through AI and strategic innovations. Welcome Mani, welcome Glenn, how are you? Welcome to Mint Etc. How was your trip to Bangalore? Let's start there.
Well, it's been fantastic. He made an international trip. I'm assuming that he's settled down there.
How's the jet lag?
It's good. I actually like the jet. I get to sleep in the morning is how I think about it. But yeah, I mean, beautiful new airport for Bangalore. Traffic, still bad. But yeah, it's always fun to come and enjoy India.
Amazing. So Mani, let's begin with you. You have over 2 decades of consulting experience, right? With India's AI expenditure projected to reach about $11.78 billion by 2025. That's a huge number. And 5G expected to add up to 2% of our GDP by 2050. What strategic opportunities do these technological advancements create for companies specializing in digital identity and consent-driven data sharing?
Deepti, that's a fantastic question. Already you see multiple industries, as you mentioned earlier on, be it banking, in retail, healthcare, they're already starting to do this. So you have, I would say, a pretty integrated demand that's going to come for digital identity solutions. I think there's more to secure and the transactions and comply with the data privacy laws. And you just talked about the personal data protection bill, right? So, I mean, there's a growing need for niche players in the market who's going to come and where we need strategic partnerships with telecoms, be it enterprises, with regulators, more importantly, to develop interoperable, I would say, easy to use digital identity frameworks.
Right.
So this is a more seamless user experience and it's more unique customer experience that actually we're going to see going forward. And I think the market leveraging AI for identity verification can significantly boost accuracy. And I would say it will mitigate fraud to a large extent that's out there at the moment. So with 5G boosting, I would say significant data growth, the need for secure consent-driven data sharing platform is very important. Obviously the 5G is obviously going to help in the latency, low latency and high speed. So we talked about the Aadhaar system, which is a very great example that you can talk about, which is a consent-driven model for AI and 5G enabled digital services. Right. Obviously, it's balancing innovation with privacy. So I think there are these unique opportunities, and at countries like developing countries like India, also there is a big difference between now which one of those concepts are becoming emerging markets and more developed markets. I think India is more into that, kind of moving out of that emerging and actually going to define a lot of these opportunities going forward. So with that, actually more opportunities for companies like Affinidi. And Glenn, let me get you in here. You are leading the shift from platform-defined to self-defined identities. And with your vast experience in driving innovation and market disruption through technology, and as you know, many countries, and more so in India, as the regulations tighten, how can digital identity platforms ensure and secure private identity verification for the businesses in India? What's your take on it? Where are those? What strategies should one adopt?
Yeah, it's a very complex question with a very complex answer. But I think the reality is step back for a second and think, what does privacy even mean? Like, why does it matter? And privacy, it is actually something that an individual defines for themselves, right? What I view of what I'm willing to share with others is probably different to you, Deepti, and different to you, Mani. And this is the problem. In the current digital world, I don't get to choose my privacy. It's the platforms that choose that privacy for me. And I don't have any say in it. I don't even know what they're doing with this data. And it's being sold in third-party networks, and then that's used sometimes against me, and it's incredibly inaccurate. And I think what that's doing is it ultimately yields to a lack of trust in things. And if you look at AI, for example, right now, there's so much talk, which is good. Talking about things is healthy, and debating it. But we should just take a moment and realize the majority of AI that is out there has been trained on public data. And now you're starting to see, as good as public data is, the next set of valuable data is the data within corporations, right? In terms of what is it that is private to the company, but shared within the company. And that allows them to know their customers better and give unique experience, insights, product insights. But you know what the richest data set in the world is? It's your data. It's our data. And they can't really touch that yet because, interestingly, it's fragmented across all these different platforms. My shopping history is spread across a number of sites, what I like to watch and entertain myself, what I like to play games, what am I learning. It's all just spread everywhere. And this is why the privacy laws and data protection acts are really important, because we have to get it right before we blindly just kind of give up all this valuable data about ourselves. And it is used in ways that we never anticipated, or more importantly, gave permission to. And so I think it's actually a massive opportunity that companies who put privacy first, what they're really doing is securing their future by earning trust with their customers and saying, here is how we're going to use your data. Here's what we do with it. And by the way, we're giving transparency, and we're going to give some control back to you in that if you don't want to share something with us, you can revoke that consent. But it sounds simple, but it's actually super complex to do, particularly if you're in a regulated industry. I mean, one of the things I love about India is you are pushing the boundaries of giving that control to individuals. And it's very different. You are giving rights to the individual. I have a right to erasure, a right to modify my data, a right to nominate others to help me with this. Incredibly powerful things. But also in India, you have a love of bureaucracy and regulation. And for companies, you've got competing legislation now that says, in one hand, citizens have the right to delete their data, but also now you, as a company, you have to keep data for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years.
True.
So which legislation wins in that case?
Sure.
And I think these are some of the complexities that will get sorted out. And that I don't have a right to deletion in all situations. Obviously, a bank has to keep a record of financial transactions 5-7 years, depending on what they're doing. So as we just figure that balance out, that's where a lot of innovation will come through. And companies that do that better with greater transparency will earn trust with their customers more, which means their customers will share more about themselves, which means they offer a better customer experience. And so we're actually, I believe, entering an economy of trust. which is very, very different to how we've been operating in the past.
Very, very articulately put. Since we are talking about customer experience, it's crucial for certain industries to have that, especially when it comes to BFSI or retail or healthcare even, because so much of it is private information. And if it's out there, then it's used against you and you could stand to lose everything, right? So how does the future of privacy look? Of course, you sort of touched upon it previously, but just tell us how does it look, and how will it change? How will it impact businesses and consumers alike?
Yeah, I think it's really about, we've got to untrain ourselves from asking bad questions. So if you think about it, right? How often do you share your date of birth when you're creating accounts and doing things? All the time.
All the time.
Why? Why do they need to know my exact birth date? That gives away so much information. Whereas the question they're really asking, are you an adult?
Absolutely.
Yes or no? Are you a student? Yes or no? Are you retired? Yes or no? So some of this comes back to these just fundamental aspects of we're asking the wrong questions. No surprise, a lot of these questions come because, and again, I'm an engineer, I'm a nerd, so we like to deal with absolute data. So of course, from an engineering perspective, it's like, what's the most accurate way to know if you're an adult? I know, I'll ask for your date of birth.
Yeah.
But this creates leakage of information. Same thing, for example, if I'm getting a home loan. Often the home loan application, how does it work? I want to have 3 months of your pay slips and I want 3 months of bank statements. I've just given away how much I earn, which then has other aspects, which a bank can use analytics and say, was Glenn overpaid, underpaid for that role? You can see exactly how much money you have in the bank account. Whereas the question they really need to ask is, you're getting a loan of a certain size. So are you getting paid at least this much to cover the loan? And do you have at least the 10, 20% deposit? And that again should be a yes or no answer.
Right.
And so the first step is kind of changing this culture of what are the questions we even ask. The second part is empowering the individuals to be able to hold that data themselves and then choose how they want to represent themselves to these businesses. Maybe if that bank says, for example, Glenn, do you have $10,000 in the bank account? I might say, I've got at least 10,000, but what if I have more? Is there value in me saying, look, if I've got more, can I get a better discount, or do I lower my risk profile? So now that's putting the power into me as to what I'm willing to share, but it's an exchange of value.
Yes.
And I think this is like the most powerful thing ever. The last thing I'd say on this is if we look at history, particularly in the digital age, for the last 30 years, one thing has held true every single disruption wave, which is every time we made data more accessible, more open, and put that in the control of the individual, that has driven the $1 trillion waves of innovation. Right? The first generation of the internet, where we could consume information globally and giving rise to Wikipedia that changed how we think about education content, completely disrupted markets. When we had the rise of smartphones and being able to take video and content and share that literally via social networks to millions of people anywhere in the world. That created the big platforms of today. Cloud computing changed infrastructure and how digital native businesses and startups work. Privacy and trust will do the same thing, because it's going to unlock that rich data set, which is all of that data of yourself. And I'll give you a little thought experiment. If you just think for the moment, what's a digital brand that you really like dealing with and that you trust? And now think for a second and go, do they truly understand who you are? And I would say no. Now,
I can't think of one.
You can't think, but if you think of one that you kind of trust a little bit. And what's interesting is, Deepti, if I said to you, if there was a safe and secure way for you to share more about yourself, to get a better customer experience, more personalization, maybe more help and assistance, are you willing to do that? But it's in your control.
Yes.
And I think the answer is yes, of course.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to give that information to brands I don't trust. And this is why this economy of trust is so important, because businesses that actually put the privacy first and give that transparency, they have a competitive advantage where if you as a customer are saying, I'm willing to share more about myself to get that value and insights, how does a competitor break into that cycle?
Right.
Incredibly difficult. And so now you have an incredibly powerful competitive advantage.
India's identity and access management market at this point of time is very nascent, right? It's contributing to just about 1 or 2% of the global market. Considering the challenges that you've already spoken about, such as weak compliance controls, scalability issues, what strategies then can companies adopt to address these obstacles and better support Indian businesses? That's what I'd like to know from you, Glenn.
So it's fascinating you say that, because I have a global role. I live outside in India, and as I travel and talk to other countries and other companies, it's fascinating how often the India stack is held up as best practice. I mean, you have the biggest identity store in the world with Aadhaar, the biggest in the world. If you look at Africa, and Africa is trying to leapfrog multiple technologies as they digitize as a nation, they bring e-health services in. They're basing that in the India stack.
True.
So to me, it's like fascinating that in India, you kind of look at it going, are we doing enough? But at a worldwide level, in some ways, you're so ahead of the curve on some of these aspects, and the rest of the world is kind of looking at how do we roll this out as you go through. So I'll just say, take a moment and actually just go, good job, India. And kind of DP actually takes us forward. Now, that being said, there is so much more to do as we go through this. And I think for companies, again, it is complex. It is really difficult. And sometimes changing the way a company, you think about it as a bank, for example, to change how they think about the identity of a customer. It's almost like doing a heart transplant. It is at the center of everything. It's the representation of the customer themselves. Not easy to change. It's connected to everything. It's connected to the account structure. It's connected to the security posture around that. It's connected to the product recommendations that are coming through, the personalized services as you go through. And as we now layer AI on top, all of that is kind of trying to work out who you are as well.
Right.
But my thesis on this is that everything you do around data has to start with identity. Because if you don't have a good handle on who you're dealing with, then you've already lost the game. You've already lost the game, and you're just putting band-aids upon band-aids. And you see this in our industry all the time, where we just add complexity upon complexity. And when you do that, we're making it harder for the humans. And I'll give you an example. If you look at KYC, know your customer, we know that AI is impersonating humans. So now in some markets, we do these really, we think, clever things to say, I want to prove, how do I know you're human? So I want you to hold up your ID and I want you to pat your head while you do this. One, I feel like an idiot when I'm doing that and trying to hold the camera and my ID and going, I need a third hand to kind of pat my head. But do you really think AI can't do that? Can't create a video? Of course it can.
It can.
So you're not addressing anything. You're not fixing a problem. You're just inconveniencing the human.
True.
And I think that's what we have to do, is to kind of bring all of our innovation back to what suits the human.
How can digital identity solutions transform this future of work, education, and social interaction in this, I would say, most dynamic and changing environment that you actually got?
Look, actually, ironically, I think, no, there's not a nice way to say this, but depending where you are in that socioeconomic stack, the lower down that stack you are, I actually think the improvements we can bring through changing digital identity is actually more powerful. And I'll give you, again, an example. If you're a gig economy worker and I've been working for one platform, and let's say, I've done 1,000 jobs and I've got my 5-star rating, the challenge for them is if they move to another gig platform, they're starting from scratch again, right? And so what if they could bring that data, those recommendations, their reputation from one platform into another, so that I'm not starting from zero every time. I actually say, hey, I was the highest rated, I was, the fastest delivery driver in Bangalore. That would be saying something with the traffic, right? That actually would make them attractive to other gig platforms as they go through this. And so them controlling their own data and bringing that, and then, okay, so you're the best, let's say delivery driver as you go through this. Well, they're going to need a vehicle. They need insurance to go through this. What if they could prove all that, saying not only I'm the fastest, but I'm also the safest?
True.
So their insurance comes down as a result of this. You just start seeing that all of this data, we're not using it because it's all locked up in these different systems as we go through. So I actually think for gig economy workers, for people at the start of their career where you don't have a lot of data, you sometimes just have your academic record. But what if they could turn around and say, you know what? Not only do I have an academic record, but I did these other hobbies, I've had other interests. Actually, on YouTube or TikTok, I've watched 50 hours of educational content on this. Shouldn't that count? For something, it should count, right? I mean, that's how younger generation is learning. They would be more excited to interview someone who could say, here are all the blogs, the podcasts that I listen to, TikTok videos, and then I'm going to ask them, well, what's your take on that? What have you learned? What do you think's right? What do you think's wrong? That gives more insight by being able to have that data at our fingertips than an academic record. That doesn't really tell me much about you.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I just want a personal story for my son. When he was doing his 9th grade, he actually ended up doing a lot of this coding on GitHub. And
great. So his contribution log on GitHub would be, if he wants to be a software developer, I would be looking at that more in his education record.
Yeah. And I think when he was actually graduating and being in the Indian system, he was kind of obviously very aware that would this actually count or not.
Yeah.
In the back of his head, he was thinking about whether I should be saying this to him.
They should, absolutely.
But it worked for him. But I think I see where you're getting from. So this ability to take your data with privacy and with trust,
it's
absolutely is going to be critical.
It's really from a consumer point of view. We can't talk about it as this holistic identity. You've got this fragmentation of yourself across. So first thing we need to do is discover ourselves again. Where is all our data? I mean, even that question alone is, do you know? And on average person in a lifetime, 160 to 200 platforms that you've interacted with. I don't even know where my data is.
Right.
So once I discover that, I need to collect it again. I need to bring that in and store that in my own vault.
Yeah.
Now, once I've done that, then I can have the ability to, how do I want to share this back out again? So it's kind of this kind of one movement is bringing that back in and reclaiming that control of your data and your identity. And then it's the sharing back out again, which goes back to what we were saying earlier about if I can share more about myself in exchange for value, then that's where there's more data flowing around. And then ultimately over things, and one of the good things as we get older is that uniqueness of our identity, the history of everything you've done. I mean, just imagine if you had at your fingertips all of the data you've generated of your lifetime.
Right.
Do you know the value of that? What if you could monetize it? If you talk to health research pharmaceutical companies, they really, with the rise of customizable medicine, if they could get access and say, hey, Deepti, what if you could share like all the wearable device tech and what that's been saying about you and your stress levels and sleep patterns and diet and what you've bought and all of this, you're going to get a better diagnostic.
Yeah.
But they can't access it right now. And actually, they would probably pay money to use that, and so they can create better medicine, better treatment plans for us as we go through this. So again, I get so excited about what the opportunities are. I think we're just, the tip of the iceberg of realizing, and this goes back to, we've got to rethink how we think about privacy. It's a big part of innovation. It's not a blocker.
Right.
Thank you so much, Mani. Thank you so much, Glenn. It was such an insightful conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience has also learned a lot from this episode. But just to sort of, consolidate all the points together, I'm just going to, sum it up. In this episode, we examined the impact of AI and 5G on data and security. We discussed how digital identity solutions can enhance user experiences and navigate regulatory issues. As India's identity and access management market evolves, adopting proactive data protection measures is extremely crucial. And this discussion also underscores the fact that adapting to these changes is vital for businesses to succeed in today's fast-paced digital landscape. Thank you once again, Mani and Glenn. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Deepti.